We got a little bit of an early showcase of the banners that are coming up for Mualani and Chasca. So we got Mualani, Chasca, Bennett, Ororon, and Aoife. So all the male characters that showed up in the summer event. And then Surf's Up, Astral Vulture's Crimson Plumage, Wave Riding Whirl, the Flower Feather Bow, Fav Sword, Fav Lance, and the Fruitful Hook. Ooh, this is actually pretty interesting. Let's talk about the character banner first and review that along with the weapon banner as well, because they're both pretty good, but they may not be worth pulling on, especially right now. So I've talked about the 5 stars overall. I won't go over them in too much detail. Mualani is better for single target damage and just big numbers, and if big numbers make your brain release a lot of endorphins, she's pretty good for that with Xiangling or just anyone that applies enough pyro that she can do this strong vaporize. So she's kind of fun, but really not that useful. I like her, but again, after playing her for a while, I know that she's definitely not for everybody. And she's definitely not that good in too many situations either. And then we have Chasca, who is a little bit more versatile. You just need characters that work off-field and don't require any special like normal attacks or anything. So like Xingqiu doesn't work with her. Luckily, like Bennett and Ororon both work pretty well with her, and then Anefa works with her, and Sitlali and Shenhe. So she's got some good options, but she is a little bit more limited than other Animo characters that are doing like absorption damage. So both pretty decent 5 stars. A lot of people may want to be saving for Nodcry characters, which we'll talk about as we go over these banners and the weapons overall, but both the 5 stars are pretty good. They're more or less characters that I think at this point you would wish for just if you want them, not because they are particularly overpowered. However, the 4 stars on the banner are really useful. Bennett, easily one of the best characters in the game, and now that we have the summer event and people have gotten his skin, there's probably more incentive to pull him. Constellation wise, C1 is his strongest constellation right after C5 or right before C5. So if you have C0 Bennett and you manage to get 1 copy, you're pretty much good for a really long time. And there was this rumor that C6 Bennett was just someone who ruined a bunch of characters. That may have been true in like the very beginning of the game, but now like if you have C6 Bennett, you might as well activate it. He plays with so many pyro characters or enhances so many teams with the pyro infusion that he provides that it's more of a benefit for those characters than a detriment. The only characters that are really not good with C6 Bennett are characters like Eula. And even then, you could still technically play Pyro Eula if you really wanted to. And then we've got Ororon, who is a pretty good 4-star from Natlin. Base-wise, he's pretty decent in terms of his constellations. Constellation 2 is probably the one that you would want to get if you wanted an early constellation. His C1 makes his skill balanced. It's like whatever, his skill's kind of useless. It's basically just there for energy. He's pretty much all about his burst and mostly his passive, which needs to trigger when you do electro charge. So the C2 gives him extra electro damage bonus. It can give him up to 32%, so that is really helpful in AoE when his burst hits enemies. If you're doing it in single target, it's much harder to get that passive active. So C2 is a pretty good place for Ororon. C4 makes his burst spin faster, which can help activate the C2 a little bit. And then his C6 can give the active character an attack bonus if you trigger his passive. 3 times you get the max value out of it to give your active character 30% attack, or just 10% every time he triggers his passive up to 3 stacks. So very, very solid character. If you were wishing for Chasca and Mualani, you'd want to see more copies of Ororon and Bennett, because as fun as Aoife is, he is not a very good character at all. I think Aoife is here just for the flavor because he and Chasca are both Animo characters from the Flower Feather clan. Otherwise, he doesn't really have any place in these teams like at all. I mean, Bennett, like, he's mostly here because Bennett Mualani from the event, and then Ororon works well with Chasca. Aoife's here, I guess, just for Natlin 4-star characters. He's a very fun character, but again, his damage is terrible. His healing isn't really the best either. and he just kind of floats around and is like cheaper, great value version of Mizuki, and Mizuki is not even a very good character to begin with either. So if you were wishing on this banner, you'd like to see a lot of the Bennett and Aurorons and a lot less of the Evas. Now the weapon banner is actually pretty interesting because we got Surf's Up and Chasca's signature weapon, the Astral Vulture's Crimson Plumage. Both are pretty good. The Surf's Up is much better for Mualani. It's not as good for a character like Neuvillette if you wanted to get it because it does focus on normal attack damage and Neuvillette wants charge attack damage. But if there is a Catalyst character that you've got your eye on that likes normal attack damage, doesn't care that there's a low base attack for the weapon, and wants a lot of crit damage, then this is a pretty solid weapon. Chasca's bow is pretty good as well. It's a pretty good general bow for any bow character that likes charge attacks, and it gives you crit damage as well, so pretty decent overall for any charge shot bow character. And for the 4-star weapons, we got 2 Fab weapons and 3 Natlin weapons. So if you are going for Chasca, this one's pretty interesting because the Flower Wreath Feathers is Chasca's best 4-star weapon, and so if you can get that with a lot of refinements, it's actually really nice. Wave Riding Whirl is not really that good. It's an HP catalyst that like increases your HP. It's not super useful. Fruitful Hook is pretty nice if you got a plunge attack character. If you were playing like Plunge to Luke or Gaming, this can be a pretty solid claymore, especially if you get some refinements on it. And then the 2 Fab weapons are super useful. In terms of overall versatility, the Fab Lance and the Fab Sword are the most versatile, most useful weapons here. And then afterwards, it just kind of depends on which characters you have. If you do pull for Chasca, getting a copy of this 4-star or a few of them is pretty solid. And then if you like playing Gaming or Plunge to Luke, then Fruitful Hook is good, and the Wave Riding Whirl is the worst weapon overall. So these banners are pretty good, but in terms of actual value for your account, they are a little bit sus right now, especially right before 6.0 and Nod Cry. I would say if you're kind of on the fence and considering wishing, if you're not full in, like, oh, I'm definitely going for Mualani, or I'm definitely going for Chasca, and I'm definitely going for their weapons, if you have made that decision in your mind, then go ahead, live your best life. But if you are still like, I'm not quite sure yet, I would hold off and not do any wishing until we see who's coming in 6.0 and we get some info on their banners, because then we can evaluate who's going to be better. If you've got really low pity, I think it's worth it to try maybe a couple wishes and maybe see if you can pick up a copy of Bennett or Ororon if you don't have them, especially if you're unlocking Bennett C1 or Ororon C2. Otherwise, I think I'd hold off, especially if you had high pity. And same for the weapon banner. Unless you have a character that could use the 5 stars and your pity is kind of low, I don't think I'd wish on this weapon banner. Trying to get one of these 2 Fab weapons over the potential 5 that you could get doesn't really have the, you don't really have the best chances, because there's only 3 characters you can get on the character rate up banner, and there's tons of horror stories, including my own personal ones, of not getting the 4-star you want and just getting the other 2 over and over and over. And if you're doing that with more options on the banner, it's going to be an even worse probability. So basically, if you are completely gung-ho, it's definitely fine to wish for these banners. They're pretty good overall for your account. If you're not sure, and if you're a newer player, you may want to do a few wishes just to see if you could get maybe a copy of Bennett or Ororon or some of their early constellations. And I would probably hold off on wishing on the weapon banner. And for most people, if you're sort of a mid-game account or more, like let's say AR45 and above, I would just say hold off here and see who's coming in Nod Cry, and we'll still have some info about what the next banners in the next version are, and then you can make your decision on whether you want to wish on these banners or not. So overall, pretty good value, but probably not one that I would recommend a lot of people wishing on, at least right away.